Now, my remarks are entitled, What We Did. I want to begin with a quotation from Ella Baker. She said, strong people don't need strong leaders. We were strong people. We did strong things. And I want to talk about some of the things we did. This began for me, as it did for many, many more. On February 4th, 1960, I was sitting in a cafe near my college campus in Atlanta, Georgia, a place where students went between or instead of classes. A student named Lonnie King approached me. He held up a copy of that day's Atlanta Daily World, Atlanta's daily black newspaper. The headline read, Greensboro students sit in for third day. It told in exact detail how black college students from North Carolina A&T University in Greensboro had for the third day in a row entered a Woolworths department store and asked for service at the whites-only lunch counter. It described their demeanor, their dress, their determination to return the following day, and as many successive days as it took if they were not served. Have you seen this? He demanded. Yes, I have, I replied. What do you think about it? He asked. I think it's great, I said. Don't you think it ought to happen here? He asked. I said, I'm sure it will happen here. Surely someone here will do it. And then to me, as it came to others in those early days of 1960, a query, an invitation, and a command, he said, why don't we make it happen here? And before I could say, what do you mean we? King, Joe Pierce, and I canvassed the cafe, talking to students, inviting them to discuss the Greensboro event and to duplicate it in Atlanta. The Atlanta student movement had begun. We formed an organization, we reconnoitered downtown lunch counters, and within a week, 77 of us had been arrested. In an early 1960s freedom song, the young people who joined together to create the Southern student movement were described in this way. You know, I debated with myself whether I should sing this. My wife said no. But I heard cries of yes. I sing this one verse. It goes, the time was 1960, the place the USA. February 1st became the history-making day. From Greensboro across the land, the news spread far and wide. As quietly and bravely, youth took a giant stride. Heed the call, Americans all, side by equal side. Brothers, sit in dignity. Sisters, sit in pride. In pride, in pride. Yeah, that's enough. Yeah. As former President Jimmy Carter told SNCC worker Mary King, if you wanted to scare white people in Southwest Georgia, Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian leadership wouldn't do it. You only had to say one word, SNCC. As John F. Kennedy said, compared to Martin Luther King's SCLC, SNCC workers were real sons of bitches.
The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee changed over time in many ways, most of them positive, I think. It began as this coordinating agency, then it became an organization with a staff that did things itself. But the time came in the 60s when Black Power sentiment was about, and it began to grow inside the organization. And there were great disputes within the organizations about what way we ought to do. Some people said Black Power is perfectly innocuous, which is a position I held. It's not horrible, it's not bad. It simply means black people running their own things. In other words, black people ought to be able to run the cities where they're a majority of. If they're the majority in the county, they ought to be able to run the county, and so forth and so on. Well, people thought this Black Power meant white exclusion. It never meant that to me, and I don't think it meant that to most of us. But in the organization, there were great disputes about what the course of action ought to be. And eventually, there was a vote within the organization. We were super democratic in SNCC on what to do next. And the question was, what should the white people who work for SNCC do? Should they continue working in black America as they had done and done well and done effectively? Or should they work in white America where the problem is? It's not black people aren't racist. it's white people who are racist. If we could straighten them out, things would be okay. So we said they ought to work there, and we had a vote on this. The white people who work for SNCC wouldn't vote. And so therefore the proposition carried without their votes, would have been defeated with their votes. And many of them decided to leave the organization. Then we elected Stokely Carmichael as the chairman, and he was a firebrand, a hot guy. He eventually wrote a book, which if you read it today about black power, you say, oh, that makes sense to me. But at the time, he let other people tell the public what it meant. And all their explanations were hostile and angry and anti-white. And so this became a bad thing. So the organization began to go into demise and eventually just went away. It's a sad thing because we need something like it today.
Julian, how often do you think about those days?
All the time, because I teach it all the time, and I see the people all the time. There's a big colony of SNCC people here in Atlanta where I am. I'm going to be with John Lewis tonight with Eleanor Holmes Norton, who's our delegate to the Congress from D.C., and she worked for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I'm going to take a civil rights tour beginning in March, beginning in Atlanta, and I'll see John there again. And on the trip, I'll see other SNCC people, other movements. So I see these people all the time. This was a magic moment in my life, working for this organization. Being in the Georgia legislature was an enormous pleasure, and I enjoyed it a great deal. Being chairman of the NAACP was a wonderful thing. Very few people get to do that. But the time I spent with SNCC was really a high point in my life. We had a reunion in April of last year, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, yeah, because it was our 50th. So it would have been 2010, yeah, okay. And it was, we expected 300 people to come, 1,000 came. And to see these people with whom I had spent so much time working for civil rights, some of it risky, some of it just a lot of fun, to see them again was just the highlight of my life. It's wonderful. I've never had, it was better than my college reunions, my high school reunions. It was the best time I've ever had.
If you had not devoted your life to racial equality, what do you think you would have been?
I don't know. I had been interested in being a journalist. So I think I might have shifted toward journalism. But who would hire me? I don't know. You know, I worked for this little black newspaper, which is a lot of fun, but that was not a living. It was working.
Right. How would you like to be remembered?
Two ways. I've always thought my headstone, I want a double-sided headstone. On one side, I wanted to say race man, and that means a man who doesn't dislike other races, but who's proud of his own and wants to lift it up. The other side is going to say easily amused. That's the way I want to be remembered.